So the slides aren't working well with the Hangout, but we'll make it work. So digital content. One of the challenges that we've had in this industry for a long time, and Mariana and others, and even the BIM experts, I mean, the whole concept of BIM, boiling it down at its base core, is how do we manage the information in the complete building life cycle and as expedient and transparent and clear and accurate as possible. And the tools of the digitalization of the world really give us that. We're a little late to the party compared to other industries. There's many industries, aerospace and all those that have been using these exact tools for years, back in decades, back in the late 70s, early 80s, even on designing spacecraft and aircraft even, and then a little later on automobiles. So, but it's crucial here that we understand that the digital content is actually the currency of the built environment. And what that allows us to do, among many other things, and not just even early in it, is define the costs. No longer do we need to estimate. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover in almost two different ways. So we've got some fun ways of looking at it here. So in the year 20 BDC, you guys all know 20 BDC, that's before digital content. This is how we communicated what we were going to build. Herman here was telling his wife Matilda that this is what he's going to do. He put a drawing on the cave wall. And this, not that many years ago, a few decades ago, we considered this was the content, not digital, it was the content. We had acetate architectural templates that were used to create drawings. So we were using drawings as the content to communicate what we needed, how we were going to build a building, how it was going to be designed, how it was put together. Here's how furniture was added, to do a space planning, to try to visualize it through pencil, even sometimes renderings of a design. I'm
going to interrupt you a little bit here, Steve. Go back on that image a little bit.
Yep.
Okay. So, guys, I will translate that, Steve. Just excuse me for a second. Isso é super incrível que o Steve está compartilhando, pelo menos eu adoro essa imagem. Ele está mostrando basicamente como o nosso pensamento desde a época das cavernas não mudou muito. A gente continua encarando tudo, todos os nossos componentes, tudo como se fosse um simples desenho. A gente tinha esses gabaritos e muitas vezes é o que as pessoas continuam pensando como o que é um conteúdo, como o que a gente chama de família, né? E não é isso, a gente não está trabalhando só com desenho mais. Quando a gente fala em BIM, a gente não está mais falando dessas representações que a gente tinha nas cavernas, né? Então, nossa, essa imagem é perfeita. You can go back now, Steve. I was just saying how incredible this image is in so many ways.
Great. Well, it is actually, it's not meant to be funny or incredible. It's true. It's actually true. And one of our challenges today, I want you to keep this image in mind. We're going to come back to this in a discussion a little later on, because anyway, we do some digital now. It's quasi-digital or semi-digital. And we crushed the digital back to this type of format. So what we ended up with out of those types of things were these drawings and versions often of drawings. In other words, a change order came through on a medical facility, and they needed to have additional chase for pipes. It needed to be made larger. It needed to become 15 centimeters instead of 10 centimeters in depth to get all the pipes in that they needed. So once that got redone by the architect, it was all paper-based, but yet it might be out in the field already, people building the building that still had the old drawings, the old, they weren't updated. So there was no single source of truth. So we had all these versions of these drawings and sketches. And so I'm going to go straight to the solution. The solution that I'm proposing is kaboom. Let's blow up these current processes. We continually use and leverage what little digitalization we have and dumb it back down and flatten it back out into drawings, quote, close quote. So the drawings are, though they're not maybe paper anymore today, they're not blueprints anymore today, they're PDFs often. And that's still a drawing. It's still just a static two-dimensional image that has to be interpreted. So I'm proposing that digitalization is what would allow us to replace those processes. We need to stop the paper-based thinking, paper-based communication, paper-based mentality in this whole industry, and begin using true digitalization and digital tools throughout the whole process. What digital tools allow us to do, or digitalization of the content, which is really what this is all about, is build it, physically or virtually build it. You've all probably heard of virtual reality and gaming, and have seen things like SimCity and these other games that are showing these environments that are so photorealistic in a lot of ways. It's hard when you're in a VR environment not to know that it's not real. And we need to do that, not just for the looks, as you'll see in a few minutes. The looks are just one aspect of the design and what digital tools allow us to do. But this whole digitalization thing, I got a quote that actually, this was myself. I was part of the team that developed the U.S. National BIM standards in 2012. I think we released it in 2013. So it's 5 years ago. And my team that I was on was the market education team. We identified the greatest single impediment to BIM implementation or digitalization was the lack of real digital content of actual building products. And back to our templates we talked about, I spoke of earlier, those, 200 different sinks could have fit that one circular profile that we drew with that little template. But those sinks all had differences. Those parts and products were not actual products being manufactured. They were just a symbol to represent that. We've got to get out of the world of symbols. We've got to get in the world of real digital virtualization to actually create this true digital twin. So in data we trust, that's what really we got to have. In the US here, on all the money it says in God we trust, but in the building industry and data we trust, because data is made up of ones and zeros. It's black or white. It does not need to be interpreted. There's no necessity for that. But for us to have data, to work from and have machine readable and codes, we got to replace these processes. And you'll hear some processes now, some new buzzwords. VDC stands for Virtual Design and Construction. IPD, Integrated Project Delivery. BIM, Building Information Modeling or Building Information Management, depending on how hard you want to argue. And there's all kinds of three-letter acronyms that are often thrown around that talk about pieces and parts. And it is very, very important because they're all part of the virtualization. But without content, digital content, we can't do any of these things. On the right, it's just kind of it's a very small little graphic there, but this was a picture of what we call the Empire State Building here in the States being built 88 years ago. And I submit to you, as short of tower cranes, there's not a lot difference that you'd see on today's job site 88 years ago. So 40 years of disruption, this is why I say we need to replace. It's really not given us any appreciable change in what we're doing. And again, the currency to make this change happen is the content. It's the digital content. So beyond a feasibility study, an owner just doing analysis, is this a good site to build that hotel on? And they're doing their market study and everything else. Once you get past that point where the decision's been made and there's a facility going to be built or rebuilt or remodeled, whatever it is, costs no longer need to be estimated. They can now be defined, again, with digital content as the bottom core currency. And that runs through all of the actors in the complete cycle, the whole building life cycle, and not just construction. Another piece that's back to one of our acronyms, here in the States especially, we hear a lot of AEC. I'm going to suggest to you that's only 10% of that life cycle. AECO, studies all over, out of Stanford, point that 91% of the dollars spent or the money spent on a facility are spent after the building is turned over to be utilized and used. So what we need, how do we do that? a cloud, I'm just going to keep this real generic, but basically a cloud accessible information store. So I'm not going to call it database. I'm not going to call it anything specific. I'm not going to call it any specific package, but essentially it's a cloud collection where it allows everyone to really embellish this storehouse of information about any building. But again, keep in mind, what's our core here? We got to have digital content for this to happen. So designing, it defines the content that we're going to use. So a designer can, if the content is available digitally to them, they can actually construct back to our build it right, build it twice, or build the digitally constructed. The designer begins that process by selecting the content that is actually going to be appropriate and perform the way that it needs to be used in that facility or in that building. So the architect now has actually begun to embellish that information store. And then allows other tools like design
visualizations can be done, but you got to have digital content. Again, you can't do a VR walkthrough with a client or the board of a school or something with paper. They have to have tools of these digital tools, and that takes digital content. Engineer, same way. I get a lot of calls here at BIM Objects for requests from some of the computational fluid dynamic cloud platforms that are out there asking for us to get manufacturer specific content for VAV boxes and different air handlers and all these, because they're using these to actually design and virtualize the HVAC and mechanical systems in many facilities at the early stages of the design development. This is an example here of SimScale. I actually did a webinar with them a few months ago. They're using this very heavily. And one of the things I say, people say, well, we'll just put it in the generic for now and figure it out later. Well, you can't cool a building with a generic HVAC system. It just doesn't work. So these are one of the platforms that are used, and there's many of them. There's many. I see more every month. Find out about more. But we've talked a lot about the digital content and in the virtualizations, but it's the data that needs to be connected to not just the geometry, not just the physical or what you see, but the performance information, all of the lifecycle information about the product, even eventually the maintenance information, and any potential parameters on when we have windows and doors are often parametric, meaning multiple sizes of the same door, but it's still the same product, just in different sizes. So we need all this real data connected to real content in order to do all these things that we need to do to replace these processes. So now drawings have been replaced. Now people, I'm going to get all kinds of mail about this. No, Steve, and I hear this every day. They're still out there. We still have to deal with that. Yeah, that's true. But we can't stay stuck in dragging one foot in the past and yet move and change a complete industry. I mean, you folks on this call, the folks at BIMExperts, everybody involved here, we got a big task. We got to change the world, and we got to help people understand how that they can benefit by this digital, leveraging this digital content and using it. One thing a lot of people sometimes I think lose sight of, depending on where they are in that actors, where they're participating in the building life cycle. Everything has to fit together like Legos. I think most people on here all over the world have worked with Legos. We all know we can buy Legos and they're going to fit. They're going to snap together. We don't have to sand down an edge. We don't have to drill holes. We don't have to do anything, and they're going to fit together. And essentially, building products have to have this occur at the assembly stage, at the construction stage. They all have to go together. So if we use that same digital content for the real digital products in the early stages of the design, it flows straight through. Historically, back to those templates, they were just kind of placeholders for a sink, and it gets figured out later on. And then they didn't figure out that the countertop wasn't deep enough for that particular sink that they ended up ordering. That's maybe an oversimplified example, but that's very costly. One school I was on years ago, they had designed and toilet stalls. And when it was all built and done, because the toilets that the contractor ended up purchasing were 2 centimeters deeper front to back, the partition doors would not open. They had to replace like 200 doors in a school. Anyway, that happens every day in this industry, and it doesn't need to with digital content. So back to that cloud information store, can either be used to access, from procurement or purchasing, whatever term is used. It gets used in the assembly phase. We're using they're referencing this same information, that single source of truth, but it requires digital content. We had to have that digital content to begin with. So even through the fabrication and assembly, and right into the owner operator, and one. Now that I think about it, it might be better to say a facility manager. Many times the owner hires a separate facility management firm. They still need this content. They still need to manage this content. They still need the value of the parameters. So a term that you may have heard used around, what we end up with in that process is a digital twin. And what I like to call a digital twin is it's living, breathing, dynamic, organic, functional, virtual, digital model of the exact facility. And we're even seeing applications now where people are laying IoT, Internet of Things, sensors on top of this digital twin to manage the building, to monitor the building, to see what's going on in the mechanical room at any given time. Even sound sensors and things like that, heat sensors for bearings and so forth. These all allow a building to be managed. But again, digital content is the currency. It's the bottom line. It's what we have to have for it to happen. So build it right, build it twice. Once again, digital content was what we were missing. Here at BIM Object, and there are other places too. So we can't do it alone. We can't boil the ocean here at BIM Object, but we have a product called BIMscript. So this is a Steve estimate, and if anyone on this has any ideas, I've been looking for any research that has been done, and we may end up having to commission this, on really what percentage of building product manufacturers' products are available in a digital context or as digital content. And I don't mean just the geometry. I don't mean just the visual. I'm talking about the properties as well that has the performance information so that they can create a complete functional mechanical system and apply the heat loads or cooling loads of a given facility based on the glazing that's been specified and see how is that going to perform. We have tools that will tell us that, but we've got to have that digital content for that to work effectively. BIMscript is a proprietary process that we have, but believe it or not, BIMscript developers, BIMscript is a plugin available for Rhinoceros, and it's freely available. And what BIMscript does, it allows that digital content maybe to come out of a PIM, a product information management system, or like SolidWorks, many of the other Inventor that these building product manufacturers use to design their products and even manufacture, digitally drive the manufacturing process. Well, we can take that, bring it into Rhinoceros, because back to the air handler that we need for that computational fluid dynamics, we don't need to know the size and the number of rivets holding the sheet metal case together for a building, a facility. We remove that in this process, and then the output of BIMscript is we can produce 9 proprietary file types out of that single Rhino model of that particular product. So you end up with a Revit, 3ds Max, AutoCAD, 2D AutoCAD, 3D IFC, Vectorworks can also consume the 3ds file type. We end up with an FBX file, a SketchUp file, ArchiCAD, and actually there's one other is OBJ. So, and what we end up with here is something like, this is a product page, this is a viewer, and allows people to even download and configure a particular item right online even before they bring it in. So this is just one way of creating this digital content, but I like to say you can get 9 for the price of 1 out of it using a tool like BIMscript. So again, if there's one core message, we all need to help people understand how important it is that we have real digital content that's be able to be virtually constructed and then have the actual loading imposed on it, because we have the tools to do that. And what does all this take? Well,
You
moving
stole
too
that
slow.
from someone.
I stole this from Mariana because this is what she does to me when I get too slow. She calls me up and says, "Steve, you better get moving. We got things to do." So, but it's always too late. Yes, but it takes all of us. It's change, and change is difficult for all of us, and we need to keep each other accountable. And it's easier a lot of times because that's familiar to copy a drawing and send it out. But another little graphic I want to point out, because I think we're at this point in this industry. We haven't been for a while, but this slide here, none of these brands, none of these existed in 2007, and they have truly changed the world. The iPad, Instagram, Snapchat, Airbnb, Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know if you can read all those or not. Spotify, Pinterest, Uber, WhatsApp, blockchain, Slack, Tesla, 4G, Android, Beats, and BIM Object. But again, these are all major forces that have changed how we live day to day in the world. And for us to do that in the building industry, it's really digital content and getting the message out and getting it produced. You can download, go to BIMscript. You can learn about it at BIMscript@BIMobject.com. I'm sorry, that's the email address. BIMscript.BIMobject.com would be the site to learn more about it. You can actually click on the "Yes, I want to learn more" icon there. And there's a complete free e-learning. The actual syllabus is available at academy.bimobject.com under the BIMscript topic. And my email is at the bottom as well. If you have any comments, helpful thoughts, criticisms, open to it all. Mariana will probably send me the shark again, and that way I know I need to get moving. So, and do we have any questions, Mariana, or anybody have any insights or any thoughts they want to share?
Yeah, definitely, Steve. I would like to ask you a few things. So the first thing that I would like to ask you is, what do you see as the direct impact of digital content and cost definition?
I will. That's a great. Oh man, that's perfect.
And what's the difference of cost definition and cost estimation, please?
Sure. The difference between cost estimation and cost difference is, and this is going to be a really extreme example, but if I'm building a 32-story hotel, truly in a model BIM model that is accurately put together, I'm going to know every cut of every piece of water piping and how many of every fitting I need before I ever start building or constructing that building. That is available to me because that becomes data in the model that's able to be extracted. And in the old days, in the early days of CAD, we often called it a BOM, a bill of materials, but that's just part of it. So cost definition now, as well as labor, many other industries for decades, auto industry in particular, has predetermined labor rates on specific tasks to change a set of tires, to and much of that is starting to happen too in the building industry, where we can tie those into the BIM model, those values for the labor rates, as well as obviously the costs for the actual products, because we know the quantities. So no longer, what we used to have to do is estimate, okay, that building's 32 stories, and let me look, I can come up, I need 200 meters of 3 centimeter copper pipe here, and you get it close. That's estimating. And usually in estimating, there's a
what they call a waste factor. So if it's interior trim, even if there's, it might be 12% that somebody adds on just for waste. We even have tools available that can optimize the cuts on standardized sheet and piping lengths to make sure that we're using the maximum utilization of the material. So the difference between cost definition and cost estimating, one is a rule of thumb, or you get it close and then you add some on, that leads to waste. Not to mention all the material you got to move around that you may not need and over-ordered or even under-ordered. Versus the cost definition, it's a hard fact that you extract it out of the model.
Great.
Yeah, I think, what was the first part? Did I answer the first part of the question?
The first part you answered is the difference between cost estimation and cost definition. And the other question was, how does digital content
Yes.
affect cost definition?
Well, just exactly what I just said by the quantities, but another way it also impacts it is it lets them, back to that computational fluid dynamics slide, the one where they're using it on the cloud. What they get to do is they actually get, by having digital content of all the pieces and parts of an assembly, it allows them to truly run that HVAC system on a certain degree day, a 32 degrees Celsius day, with the windows facing south and it's X square meters of glazing. They can see what the heat gain is going to be. And because the HVAC system has all the properties, we know what the airflow is of that fan that's running at certain speeds. We also can look at the energy consumption. How much is it drawing? What's the energy consumption for that? So, but again, that has to be the digital content and not just the geometric aspects. It's got to have the properties. It's got to have those energy utilization values, which is all available today in paper-based systems. It's on the PDF. I'm not sure what you call it there. I mean, here we call them cut sheets or submittal sheets often, or spec sheets, specification sheets. Those properties have always been available, but the engineers that, when it's on a PDF, or even going and looking it up online for a specific valve, they have to manually input those values into their computational platform. And if it's digital content, it's brought in, those values are referenced. They're able to be referenced immediately there.
Definitely.
Well, one other thing on this, Mariana, I said 20 to 30%, and that happens with a lot of BIM Objects' own customers. They still see this digital content as marketing, so they think they only need to put their top selling SKUs, their top selling products on the digital platform.
About that, there is a question here.
Okay.
Directly related to that. So the question made was, is there any kind of research or article that shows the changes or rewards for manufacturers that adopted BIM modeling for their products? Did they sell more, or did the clients gave a good feedback? So what's your perspective on that if there is no research? What do you see? What do you think that the majority of clients see as the BIM effect?
Well, I can tell you, there's one that I have submitted for us to do a case study on. I really can't give out I don't have the permission to share the name of the manufacturer, but let me say it's a large, here in the States, mechanical equipment manufacturer. When I say equipment, I'm talking about valves, fittings for piping systems. I had this conversation with them at their factory a year and a half ago, and because they only had maybe 20-25%, and I said, but you realize, and also too, the MEP, we call it here, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, even fire sprinkler systems, they're probably the more advanced in digitalization because they've been using the tools longer. But if a mechanical engineer couldn't use this brand X, I'll call it, of piping systems, they didn't have all the fittings that engineer needed to build the complete system for the soccer stadium that he was designing, or the college, the university housing unit, or the hospital, or the hotel. They often would just go to a different brand.
Yeah.
They'd go to a brand where they could download all the ones, because what the guy actually told me at this manufacturer, he goes, Steve, but that 12-inch backwater valve, we only manufacture maybe 2 of those a year. And I said, I understand that, but you understand that an engineer, if he can get that same backwater valve from another manufacturer, they're probably going to use their complete system, even though, you know, you've got all your primary fittings. It's even the more unusual ones that are needed, because they need to build this system virtually first. Now, I know that they have since added a lot of content. They just did this probably a couple of months ago. I would venture to say I can't get hard data right now, but I know that they did their own research and agreed and said, we understand, we got to do this to be able to remain and participate. Because I told him it's no different than not having a PDF cut sheet on that same valve. There's really no difference in the digital world. And I said there actually is even a bigger difference, because that PDF cut sheet can float around across all actors. People now are looking, they want that single source. It doesn't matter. The facility manager, that building's 5 years old, he doesn't want to go digging through CDs or files or a PDF. They want to go look at that virtual building and zone right in and see that particular piece of equipment, and they can pop up all of the performance aspects and maintenance information about it. And that's the reality of what the more sophisticated owners are seeing.
Definitely. And regarding manufacturers still, is there any research you didn't mention that was part of the question?
No, I really wish that we had some. At least, I deal with manufacturers all over the world, but most of my experience, heavy experience, is here in North America. And it has been for quite a few years. I don't know of any. Believe it or not, I have a acquaintance at Stanford that I'm going to be reaching out to see that he runs SIFI. I think, Mariana, you were there. Martin Fisher,
yeah.
You might have met him.
Yes.
About this. And if anyone on the show here has any information or any suggestions on that, I would love it, to get that quantifiable hard data. We can, at BIMobject, we can go through and somewhat figure out and do the research on the building product manufacturers we have on our portal, which is a significant number, but I'm going to submit to you that we don't even have 15% of the total number of manufacturers we should have if we got the whole globe on our platform.
Yeah.
So the answer is no. I don't have that research. I am thirsty for it. I think it'll really, if we had that hard data, back to data again, that we could help the manufacturers see how important it is. I'm hoping that something's going to come out of this case study I'm proposing from this one manufacturer we had here, but I can't say that I know that yet.
In Brazil, people sometimes have the impression that manufacturers around here, they are slow adopters.
Well, you guys don't have the market cornered on that. Let me say, Brazil's not alone there. I think it's pretty much all over the world in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to share. That was actually what I was hoping you could share. What's the perspective that you have from United States of the maturity of BIM and of manufacturers in general?
So there was a study that I don't know if I can get my hands on it, but back to my days when I was with the National Institute of Building Sciences here in the States, and we were creating the National BIM Standard version 3 in 2012. There was a study done that showed, and I'm just speaking from top of my mind, that it showed that we were comparing the US or North America, because that's where we're developing the standard, to Europe largely, because they had just passed the law for PAS 1192, meaning in 2016, all UK built facilities had to be built utilizing BIM. So that study showed that largely the US or the North American markets manufacturer, or the industry, the whole building industry, was 8 to 10 years behind Europe, much of Europe, and they felt that this had a lot to do with it. Also, another thing that we concluded here, and you may have the same situation in Brazil,
I'm not sure how the government's structured there, but in Europe, often they can mandate, or they have a ministry of construction, let's say in Denmark. They can mandate anything just across the whole country. Here in the US, we'd have 200 agencies that we'd have to get it aligned to try to agree, and it would be easier to herd fish than it would be to get that many agencies together.
I can imagine. Here in Brazil, we have a curious scenario because our federal institution of the government, we actually have now a BIM platform. So the government is kind of providing a place for manufacturers to share their content. However, thank you. However, the local governments, like state government and, even lower level governments, they kind of have certain autonomy. So that it's helping because the federal government is pushing everyone, but it's not as good as it could be. It could be more unified, but I think in that area we have some really greater advantages than you on the US from what you have already mentioned.
Yeah, but even in that, what we find, I mean, we have people trying to adopt different levels of digitalization across those municipalities, but then they're different often, and which is almost as much, I like to say, brain damage as, having, because now you have two different requirements that are maybe only 50 kilometers apart, just because they're different jurisdictions sometimes. So
yeah,
that's another challenge.
So Steve, here we don't have any more questions, and we are running out of time. So I would really like to thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great having you here as always. I guess that's it.